The state already calling the first witness to the stand, former National Enquirer publisher David Pecker, who they say was part of that scheme to buy and bury unflattering stories about Trump.
Donald Trump just had to sit there and listen, and I will say, just watching that camera that's directly on his face, you could tell it was difficult. It was one of the few moments when prosecutors brought up this tape that you could see Donald Trump shaking his head. He pursed his lips. He was fidgeting in his seat a little bit, shuffling with papers. At one point, he grabbed a pen. Clearly sort of, trying to figure out what to do in that moment where, remember, he can't really do much.
Breaking news, Donald Trump grabbed a pen in the courtroom. But seriously, there was actual important updates in the hush money payments case that's taking place in Manhattan. Former National Enquirer CEO David Pecker took the witness stand as the prosecution's very first witness in the hush money trial, and as the then chairman of American Media Inc., which of course publishes the National Enquirer, Pecker was in fact involved in assisting Donald Trump and brokering a deal with the adult film star Stormy Daniels, which is at the center of this case. Now, Pecker's testimony is important considering that the Enquirer played a role in these catch and kill schemes where they would buy the rights to stories that made Trump look bad, and then they would never publish it, thus catching the story and killing it before it was published for people to read about. For example, there was one story shopped around by Trump's doorman alleging that Trump had a child out of wedlock. Well, that turned out not to be credible at all, but the National Enquirer bought the rights to the story and then killed it. And that was something that was touched upon in regard to the testimony given during the trial. So David Pecker decided to broker an agreement with Dino Sajudin, the former Trump Tower doorman. Quote, "How did that come about?" Prosecutor Joshua Steinglass asked. "I asked Dylan Howard to negotiate a price, a number, to buy the story and take it off the market," Pecker said. And Dylan Howard was the editor-in-chief at the Enquirer at the time. Pecker then went on to say that Dylan went ahead, and there was two parts to this. The first part was our normal procedures. We have a source, the tipster, take a polygraph test, which I didn't realize was a standard course of action over at the National Enquirer, which is basically a tabloid, but nonetheless. At that point, Steinglass weighs in, says, "Please don't tell us any polygraph results." And then Pecker responds with, "We pursued the story." And so they pursued the story and essentially killed the story, so no one would be able to read about it, even though there was no credibility behind that story. It was unfounded, never proven. Pecker said that he and Howard are no longer in contact. He says that Howard is living in another country, Australia, and has a spinal condition that prohibits him from traveling, in case you're wondering what happened to Dylan Howard. Steinglass then asks, "Did you discuss the purchase of the story with Michael Cohen?" And Michael Cohen comes up, and I have to be honest, does not look good in this story at all. But before we get to the Michael Cohen component of his testimony, Cenk, weigh in.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you. So there's two parts of this that are really interesting. One is related to Donald Trump, and did he actually do this? The second is about how media works and how politics works and some of the dirty tricks. And so this is kind of a how-to guide on dirty tricks. Wait till you see what Donald Trump asked them to do to Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. And I think that's enormously telling. But on whether Donald Trump is guilty or not, this is devastating, because he's saying, yeah, we would pay off his mistresses and then he would funnel the money back to us. Well, what's he charged with? Falsifying business records and paying Michael Cohen for what he claimed was legal services unrelated to this. But now Michael Cohen and David Pecker are confirming, no, it was for this. And he falsified his records to pretend that it was something else. So Pecker screwed him.
So there's more. Let's get to the Michael Cohen component of this. Of course, Michael Cohen at the time was Donald Trump's fix-it attorney. And I should note, it is not standard practice at a journalistic organization to pay for stories. It's just not something that's done, okay? It's actually considered pretty unethical. So it kind of shows you the difference between a typical journalistic outlet that has actual ethics that they try to follow to the best of their ability versus a tabloid like the National Enquirer that's buying stories, and in this case, killing stories in order to help Trump win the 2016 election. So let's get to Michael Cohen. Pecker also recounted, quote, "I called Michael Cohen and I said that we have to go forward with the story." He said, "How much?" Dylan negotiated a price of $30,000. He said, "Who's going to pay for it?" I said, "I'll pay for it," meaning pay $30,000 to buy the rights of the doorman story and then kill it. This could be a very good story. I believe that it's important that it should be removed from the market. And then he said, "Thank you very much," thanked me. And he said the boss, meaning Donald Trump, would be very pleased. But Pecker also made clear that he wasn't necessarily opposed to publishing the story. It's just that timing is everything. Pecker said this: "If the story came back true, I would have published the story shortly after it was verified." But the prosecutor, Joshua Steinglass, asked if it would be before or after the election. And Pecker, I guess to his credit, was very honest and says, "I would have published it after the election."
Yeah, but actually that's very important for this trial, because that shows you it was election interference, that he was doing it for the purpose of the election, not because Donald Trump would be embarrassed. Because Trump, so this is, let me back up here because it's important for you to understand, what is this trial about, right? So, and here, the MAGA guys that support Trump have a couple of interesting cases. They say, look, the statute of limitations on the actual underlying crime of campaign finance violations has run out. Okay, that is true. And that is why I was so mad about prosecutors waiting this long to bring this case. And so then they say, look at the timing of it. They waited until he was running or almost about to run for office before they bring the cases. That's also, I think, relatively fair. And falsifying business records is a misdemeanor. What are we doing here? Okay, so let me explain. So they're not entirely wrong about the timing. And that's why I wanted this case to be pursued along with Michael Cohen when he was tried and convicted for the same crime, right? But there is an underlying crime in New York statutes about elections, and that has not run out. And the falsifying the business records are a misdemeanor unless you do it as part of an underlying crime, which is the campaign finance violation in New York, okay? Then it becomes a felony. If you say, well, okay, I get it, but I don't like it, I think it's too minor a crime. That's a fine debate to have. But did he do it? Yeah, this testimony along with everything else shows there's no question David Pecker, the guy who runs the National Enquirer, isn't buying these stories and not running them because he wanted to. No, he's either going to run them or he's going to spike them on behalf of his friend Donald Trump. And obviously Donald Trump gives him other things. He gives him scoops and then the fake stories, which is the next part of the story.
Yeah, the fake stories, man. I gotta say, Trump and Pecker really did some Republican opponents to Trump in the primary real dirty. So I'll give you specific examples that Pecker testified about. Let's go to graphic 9 where reporter Katie Fang weighs in and shares some of the testimony. Pecker on negative stories about Trump's opponents. Michael Cohen would call me and say, we would like you to run an article on a certain person, and then Cohen would send me a piece on Ted Cruz, for example, and the Enquirer would embellish it from there. Because Cohen wasn't a part of the campaign, when Cohen said we, I always thought Cohen meant him and Trump. And so just to give you an example of an anti-Ted Cruz headline that was published at the National Enquirer at the time. Ted Cruz sex scandal, 5 secret mistresses, the romps that are rocking his presidential campaign. Now, that didn't really go viral because no one can really believe that someone like Ted Cruz would have 1 mistress, much less 5 secret mistresses. But nonetheless, you guys get the point. They also went after Marco Rubio with a headline, Family Man, Marco Rubio's love child stunner.
Yeah.
They seem to have a very specific pattern here with the bad headlines.
Yeah, so look, this has 2 components to it. One is Trump is so clearly coordinating with Pecker that after each debate, they're calling him and telling him, hey, Cruz did well, Rubio did well, Ben Carson did well, so go and run a fake story about them. Okay, that brings us to point number 2. This is the definition of fake news.
Yeah.
And Trump started it. And remember, they also ran the fake articles on Facebook as part of his campaign. That was what was originally called fake news. And now this guy's complaining about fake news. Get out of town. You invented fake news, brother.
Look at that face.
Yeah.
Look at that smug face.
Yeah, totally. And now I'm gonna read you some more headlines because let's see if you can, there's 2 different patterns here. Number 1, bungling surgeon Ben Carson left sponge in patient's brain. That's after Ben Carson does well in a debate, okay?
Jesus.
Later, Trump, after Carson endorses Trump, Trump's like, he's a genius, brain surgeon, unbelievable, right? But when he's competing against him, left a sponge in the brain, idiot. Okay, but I'm not saying it. My fake news brother over here, Crooked Pecker, is saying it. Family man Marco Rubio's love child stunner, as you said, Ted Cruz's father caught with JFK assassin. Boozing Ted Cruz and fixing to lose, that's no big deal. And Ted Cruz shamed by porn star.
Oh.
Because when I saw that, I was like, wait a minute. Donald Trump is the one shamed by a porn star.
Right.
Pecker just bought and killed that story and then ran it about Ted Cruz instead. First of all, oh my God, look at how dirty this Pecker is. And of course, Trump's working with the dirtiest Pecker in the world, right? And so they're working together, and so they're accusing their opponents of everything that Trump actually did. So when you look at the, shame with the porn star,
Yep.
5 mistresses, we know 2 to 3 of them already, so that means there's probably a couple more. And then there was the headline about a love child. Okay, now the doorman story turned out to be false.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That one is false. Donald Trump doesn't have a love child. All right, anyway, that part we don't know. We do know the fake headlines about his opponents. And guys, again, if you're MAGA, really, he hates fake news? Really? Nah, he's a lifelong con man. And did he falsify those business records? There's no question he did. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.